I was standing in my parents' kitchen, watching my dad scroll through his phone with that careful expression he gets when he's about to deliver bad news. The smell of my mom's coffee still lingered in the air, and I remember thinking how normal everything felt right before he looked up at me with those tired eyes and said, "Kira, we need to talk about Dubai." My stomach dropped before he even finished the sentence because I knew, somehow I just knew, that the trip I'd been planning for 8 months, the one I'd paid $30,000 for, the one that was supposed to be our family's first real vacation together in over a decade, was about to be ripped away from me. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, and I gripped the granite counter behind me as he cleared his throat and continued talking, his words hitting me like physical blows. Something about how my brother Marcus's fiancée really needed this trip, how it would mean so much to her, how family comes first. I stood there watching my own father justify giving away my spot on the vacation I'd funded to a woman who'd been in our lives for less than 2 years. My name is Kara Blackwell, and I've spent the last 6 years of my life building something most people take for granted: financial stability. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., I'm in my home office in downtown Portland, a converted bedroom with exposed brick walls and 2 monitors that cast a blue glow across my face while the rest of the world sleeps. I run a digital marketing consultancy that I started from scratch after college, working 16-hour days for the first 3 years until I could finally afford to hire my first employee. The work isn't glamorous. Helping mid-sized companies figure out their online presence, managing social media campaigns, analyzing data that most people would find mind-numbingly boring. But there's something deeply satisfying about taking a struggling business and watching their revenue climb month after month because of strategies I developed. I keep a small whiteboard on my wall where I track client wins, and seeing those numbers grow gives me the same rush other people get from extreme sports. My office sits above a coffee shop called Grind, and the smell of espresso filters up through the floorboards every morning. I've gotten to know the baristas downstairs. Tomas always saves me the last blueberry muffin, and Maria lets me know when they're testing new seasonal drinks. It's become my routine, my safe space, the place where I built something that belongs entirely to me. At family gatherings, I'm the one who quietly picks up dinner tabs and offers to help with car repairs or medical bills. I never make a big show of it, but I remember being the kid whose parents stressed about every utility bill, and I promised myself I'd never let money be the thing that broke our family apart. If this story hits home, make sure you're subscribed. We tell these for a reason. The Dubai trip started as my idea 8 months ago during a particularly brutal Oregon winter. My parents, Diane and Robert, had been talking about wanting to travel somewhere warm, somewhere they'd never been. My mom mentioned Dubai once, almost wistfully, while we were looking at photos from her friend's vacation. Dad immediately started talking about costs, how they couldn't afford something like that on his retirement income. That's when I offered to pay for everything. Not just my portion, everything. Flights, hotels, meals, activities. The whole family, my parents, me, my older brother Marcus, and at the time, just the 4 of us. It would be expensive, yes, but I'd had a particularly good year with 3 major client contracts, and I wanted to give my parents something they'd remember forever. I spent weeks researching hotels, comparing flight times, planning an itinerary that would let us experience the city without overwhelming my 62-year-old parents. I booked the Atlantis Resort, 5-star accommodations with an ocean view, scheduled spa days for my mom, and a desert safari for my dad. The total came to just over $30,000, and I paid every penny up front because I wanted them to feel like true guests on this trip. Then Marcus got engaged to Tiffany last November. I'd met her maybe 6 times before he proposed, a 24-year-old Instagram influencer with perfectly highlighted hair and a habit of interrupting conversations to take selfies. She seemed nice enough, but there was something calculated about the way she'd laugh just a little too loud at Dad's jokes or compliment Mom's cooking with the kind of enthusiasm that felt rehearsed. The first sign of trouble came in February, when Marcus casually mentioned that Tiffany was disappointed she wouldn't be able to come to Dubai. He said it in that careful way people use when they're testing the waters, watching for your reaction. I reminded him that I'd planned and paid for this trip before they were even dating seriously, and that adding another person would completely change the dynamic and the costs. That conversation should have been the end of it. But in my family, nothing ever stays that simple. The kitchen confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening in March. I'd driven over to my parents' house to drop off some tax documents for my dad, expecting a quick visit. Instead, I walked into what felt like an intervention. Mom was washing dishes with unusual intensity, her shoulders tense. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, not making eye contact. Dad had that look, the same expression he'd worn when he had to tell me our family dog had died when I was 12. He started with pleasantries, asking about work, commenting on how tired I looked. Then the shift. His voice got softer, more careful. "We need to talk about Dubai," he said, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. He explained that Tiffany had been really upset about missing the trip, that she'd been crying to Marcus about feeling excluded from family activities, that as his future daughter-in-law, she should be included in major family events. I stood there, still holding my car keys, trying to process what I was hearing. I reminded him that this wasn't just any family event. This was a trip I had conceived, planned, and paid for entirely myself. A trip I designed specifically for our family of 4. Then came the part that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Dad said they'd all talked it over, and they thought the fairest solution would be for me to stay home so Tiffany could go instead. He used the word fairest like it meant something, like there was some cosmic justice in removing the person who'd funded the entire trip so a woman I barely knew could take her place. Marcus finally looked up from the table and added his voice to the mix. He talked about how this trip could be a bonding opportunity for Tiffany and the family, how I'd have other chances to travel, how I should want to make sacrifices for family harmony. The word sacrifice hit me like a slap, as if everything I'd done to make this trip happen was somehow expected, while her presence was essential. My mom finally turned around from the sink, dish towel in her hands, and said she thought it would be nice to get to know Tiffany better in a relaxed setting. She wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. I left without saying another word. I got in my car, drove home, and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could trust myself to walk into my house. That night I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to work. Not because I was physically ill, but because I couldn't imagine sitting at my computer, pretending to care about conversion rates and marketing funnels when my own family had just voted me out of my own vacation. I spent most of the day on my couch, cycling through disbelief, anger, and something darker, a kind of hollow recognition that this wasn't really about Dubai at all. This was about who mattered in our family hierarchy, and apparently, I'd been demoted below a woman who'd been around for 6 months. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for signs I'd misunderstood, some way to interpret their words that didn't leave me feeling so disposable. But every angle led to the same conclusion. They valued Tiffany's feelings over my investment, her potential discomfort over my actual sacrifice. Around evening, I was going through old photos on my laptop when I found a folder from last Christmas. There was a picture of me and my dad working on a puzzle together, his reading glasses sliding down his nose as he concentrated on finding corner pieces. In the photo, he's laughing at something I'd said, and there's this expression on his face, proud, almost. Like he was genuinely happy to have me as his daughter. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the man in the image with the one who'd stood in the kitchen and told me to give up my spot for someone else's comfort. Then I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me when I was little and other kids would take my toys. Sometimes, Kira, you have to show people what they lose when they don't treat you right. That's when I started planning. My first instinct was petty: cancel everything, get refunds where possible, leave them scrambling. But most of the bookings were non-refundable, and besides, that kind of scorched earth approach would only make me look like the problem. I needed something more surgical, something that would make them understand exactly what they'd thrown away. I started by calling the resort. I explained that there had been a change in our party composition and asked about their policies for modifying reservations. The customer service representative, a woman named Aisha with a crisp British accent, walked me through the options. Since I was the primary booker and the card on file was mine, I had complete control over the reservation. I could add guests, remove guests, change room configurations, essentially anything I wanted. That gave me an idea, but I needed more information. Over the next few days, I did some detective work. I looked up Tiffany's social media accounts more thoroughly, studying her posts, her friends, her lifestyle. What I found was interesting. She was living well beyond any reasonable income for someone her age. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, a car that cost more than most people make in a year. Either she had family money, or she was very good at creating an illusion of wealth. I also started paying more attention to Marcus's behavior. He'd been distant lately, stressed about things he wouldn't discuss. When I dug deeper, I discovered some concerning details about his financial situation. Credit card debt, a loan against his car, some investments that hadn't gone well. My successful younger sister probably looked like a pretty attractive safety net. My first attempt at confrontation failed completely. I tried calling Marcus to appeal to his sense of fairness, to remind him of everything I'd done for our family over the years. He just kept repeating the same talking points about family unity and giving Tiffany a chance. When I pointed out that I was also family, he actually said that sometimes we have to put others first. As if I hadn't been putting others first for years. That conversation made me realize that reasonable discussion wasn't going to work. They'd already decided I was expendable. Time to show them what that actually cost. The revelation came from an unexpected source. While researching Dubai itineraries for what I now realized would be my own solo trip, I discovered something that changed everything. Tiffany had been to Dubai before, not once, but twice in the past 18 months. Her Instagram stories, if you scrolled back far enough, showed her at the exact same resort I'd booked, the Atlantis, posing by the same infinity pool I'd planned for us to enjoy together. But that wasn't the most interesting part. The interesting part was who she'd gone with, a different man each time, both considerably older, both obviously wealthy based on the private jets and first-class accommodations featured in her posts. The photos were strategically cropped and the men's faces were carefully obscured, but the luxury was impossible to miss. I spent hours going through her social media history, creating a timeline. The trips, the expensive gifts, the lifestyle that clearly exceeded any legitimate income. It painted a picture of someone who was very good at finding wealthy men to fund her adventures. And now she'd found Marcus, or more accurately, Marcus's family. Specifically, Marcus's sister with a successful business and the tendency to pay for family vacations. The final piece fell into place when I discovered she'd been tagged in photos by other women on similar trips, a whole network of young women who seemed to specialize in luxury travel with older men. It wasn't prostitution, exactly, but it wasn't love either. It was a business model, and my family had just become her latest clients. Armed with this information, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of canceling the trip, I upgraded it. I used my access to the reservation system to book additional activities, spa treatments, and dining experiences, all charged to my original card. I created an itinerary that would cost me an additional $15,000 but would give me something money couldn't buy, the truth. Then I did something that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I booked myself a ticket to Dubai, arriving 2 days before my family's scheduled arrival. It was time to show them exactly what they'd chosen over me. The Dubai revelation didn't unfold like a movie. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public exposure, no satisfying moment of vindication. Instead, it was a quiet dismantling that happened over the course of 3 days, while I watched my family discover exactly what they'd traded me for. I was sitting by the pool at the Atlantis when they arrived, wearing sunglasses and reading a book, looking like any other resort guest. The look on Marcus's face when he spotted me was worth every penny of the additional expenses. Confusion, followed by panic, followed by something that looked almost like shame. Tiffany recognized the resort immediately, of course. I watched her face change as she realized her mistake, bringing my brother to a place where she'd been photographed with other men, where staff members remembered her and greeted her by name, where the entire narrative she'd constructed began to crumble. I didn't need to expose her. The resort did it for me. The concierge who remembered her from her previous visits. The restaurant hostess who asked about her last companion. The spa manager who mentioned her regular treatments with her previous male friends. Each interaction was a small crack in the facade, and Marcus, to his credit, was smart enough to notice. By the second day, I could see the realization dawning in my parents' faces as well. They'd given up their daughter's generosity for a woman who'd been using their son as her latest sponsor. The family bonding experience they'd envisioned turned into a series of uncomfortable discoveries about the person they'd chosen to welcome into our family. I spent my days exploring Dubai alone, taking the tours I'd originally planned for all of us, eating at restaurants I'd researched for months. It should have felt lonely, but instead, it felt like freedom. I was done being the family member who could be sacrificed for someone else's comfort. I returned from Dubai with something I hadn't expected: clarity. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the quiet confidence that comes from finally understanding your own worth. The trip cost me $45,000 in total, but it gave me something priceless: the knowledge that I didn't need to keep buying my place in other people's lives. Marcus and Tiffany broke up 3 weeks after Dubai. My parents never directly apologized, but my mom started calling more often, asking about work, inviting me to dinner. Dad began including me in family decisions again, as if testing whether I'd forgiven them. I hadn't, not completely, but I'd moved past needing their acknowledgement of what they'd done wrong. The most unexpected outcome was my business. Removing myself from the family dynamic that had trained me to always give more than I received freed up mental energy I didn't know I'd been spending. My consultancy grew by 40% that year, and I started attracting clients who valued expertise over discount rates. Sometimes people ask me if I regret spending so much money on a lesson. But here's what I learned: the people who truly belong in your life won't ask you to prove it by erasing yourself. And sometimes, the most expensive gift you can give yourself is the truth.